Buenos dias, Alistair, and thank you for joining us today at Business Spotlight Series. Today, I am excited to introduce Alasdair Meldrum, owner of Albion Environmental. Welcome, Alasdair.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on.
So, Alasdair, the business was established in 2002.
2002, yes.
Great. So you've endured, the 5 year. 50% of businesses don't make it to 5 years. So you've quadrupled that.
I,
Yeah.
I used to have a customer that told me that every single year till about the business was about 10 years old.
Brilliant. Um, and you are in the waste management business. My first question, just to open this interview, is this something you always wanted to do? From when you were at the school, daydreaming, what do I want to be when I grow up? A fireman, or how do you come up with this? How
No,
do you end up here?
I think if you talk to most people, so our business, we provide training and consultancy for the waste management sector. If you talk to most people in the waste management sector, none of them planned on going into the waste management sector when they left school. Very, very, very few. So my career journey is probably a series of wrong turnings. I used to, when I was a student, I used to teach windsurfing in the summer and skiing in the winter. And then somehow I ended up in a job in a waste management company. So my other brother still does his skiing and windsurfing every day of the year. So that was my first wrong turning.
Okay, excellent. Now you've got a number of brothers, don't you?
Yes, yes.
And how, in terms of a business owner, were you do you always wanted to own a business? How do you become a business owner? Is
I don't think I ever. I think like most people, I went to university, I did a degree, and then I thought I would get I did get a job, and
Yes.
I was in a job for, well, first company I was 5 years, second company I was probably 5 years, and then at that point I set up myself, and it was probably circumstances. I was living in Ayrshire. In terms of waste management, there's probably a really limited number of careers in Ayrshire. So I was left with a choice. Either I was going to have to move away from Ayrshire, or the only alternative I had was actually setting up myself. And I probably made that decision slightly easier for myself because I left a good, well-paying job to an absolutely disastrous job.
Tell us
So
more.
I left a good job in September 2001 and walked into this new job. And I remember vividly driving home thinking, what on earth have I done? And my son, at the time, my son was a year and a half old, or just over a year and a half old. I was the main earner in the family. And I had to do something pretty quickly because I realized I couldn't stay in this company for long.
So what made it a disastrous job? It was the company wasn't going to make it, or
A
long
lot,
hours?
lots of things. So I'd moved from, so I'd previously run landfill sites. So sites that were taking lots of waste. So the two sites I ran took something like 500,000 tons of waste every year. So it was, pretty significant operation. And I talked myself into moving to an incineration company. It was moving high tech. This is the way the sector was going. This was back in 2002, obviously. And I moved to a company that had a clinical waste incinerator and an animal carcass incinerator. But unknown to me at the time, the owner was a lunatic, and quite a dangerous person in terms of just how he ran his business and so on. And he shut down early 2002. The business had just shut down, so the business wasn't going to survive. Didn't it fit in terms of how I operated in terms of standards and so on. And I soon realised I had to get the hell out there.
Yes, yes. So what happened then?
Well, I suppose I had a former customer that this company I was working for was effectively his competitor, and he tracked me down on my house phone, and he basically said, "What the hell have you done?
Mm.
Why did you not tell me?" And
Yeah.
I never told you because you would have talked me out of it.
Yes.
and he fully admitted that. And you know, at that time, I'd been thinking about. So I had various discussions with some colleagues about setting up in business myself, but it was very much a theoretical thing that, you know, I could do this. It was never I actually need to do this, but that really spurred me on to. I effectively set the deadline for Christmas that I was going to give my notice in for just before Christmas. I was going to have 2 weeks off over the Christmas break, and then I was going to start up in business, and that's what I did. So I was, in a way, I was fortunate because I had that sort of 4 months where I was in a job that was fairly disastrous. I just had to make sure I kept doing what I was meant to be doing for, you know, that short period of time. But at the same time, in the background, I was effectively setting up the business and doing all the, if you like, the administration bits of setting up a
Yes.
business, like the bank accounts and you know,
Yes.
getting your accountant and so on. So that's what I managed to do. So in some ways, it was, you know, was it a mistake to go to that company? In hindsight, probably, you know, it was a mistake, but you know, it worked out for the better, or I made it work out for the better.
Yeah. Everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's
It's not a comfortable time at the time, though.
yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. That's great. So, by the way, do you have any, is your family, your background entrepreneurial? Are you the only business owner in the family? Do you?
No, no, no. So my in terms of the father and mother, my father was an accountant. You know, long term. You know, was there for most of his life.
Hmm.
My mum always had numerous. I'm not. I wouldn't go as far as say jobs, but she had ways of earning money. You know, she was a swimming teacher. She fixed clothes, you know, so she would hem clothes and fix clothes. She did summer schemes in the summer for the council. You know, she was always doing, you know,
Something.
different things to earn a few pound. So maybe there's something there. But
Yeah.
interestingly, uh, five brothers and a sister, and all of us actually now run our own business except
Wow.
my sister. Uh,
Wow.
and all initially had jobs. Well, I'm saying all except one had jobs, and then sort of diversified into their own businesses. So yeah, there's maybe something in the family.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So tell us about when you started the business. Yeah, what was your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was almost believing you could do it.
Hmm.
You know, everybody tells you it's so difficult and so hard. And the reality was, because I'd spent that 4 months, I'd prepared, I'd managed to get customers. And I can remember quite vividly the first few weeks, sort of looking behind me and thinking, right, something's going to go wrong. This is too easy. This is, you know, I've got customers, I've got new work coming in, you know, why does everybody say this is so difficult? You know,
So,
but
but has it always been plain sailing in the past 20 odd years?
no, no, we've always had our challenges, but I think the basis I always set up on was my sort of rule of thumb is from talking to a customer to actually getting work from a customer can be as long as 6 months. So you've always got, and I think this is what I got caught out with very early on. What happens is you get busy doing the day job, you get busy earning the money, and you forget to do what I call sowing the seeds. You forget to put these reminders out to people, just saying, you're still here. I know you don't need anything now, but if you need anything in the future. So I did at the start have a lot of occasions where I'd get to the end of a busy period, and then I'd suddenly realize I had no work, you know, in the next week or the next month or whatever. And to be honest, I used to, I'm not saying panic, but it used to cause a bit of concern.
Yes.
And latterly I recognized that, you know, enjoy the time off.
Mm.
Was one of the challenges of running a business, a consultancy business, training business, is, you know, you don't have one boss, you just end up having 30 or 40 bosses.
Yes.
You know, they all want the slice of you to
Yes.
you know, but whenever they require something.
Yes. But that's quite typical for many small, medium-sized businesses to the CISO effect. You know,
Yes.
you get a lot of inquiries, clients, and you are serving those clients, and you don't do the sales and marketing, and then there is a drop. So yes. So how do you manage to get stability in your business to grow rather than up and down?
Honest answer, we probably still have that issue to this day. Where we benefit is we've got three core services, if you like. So we've got three different areas. And what we really find is very rare for all three to be down at the same time. So if one area is up, the other two are down,
Yes.
and vice
You've
versa.
diversified a little bit.
So
That's one
yeah,
way of
so
doing
we've
that.
got a lot of flexibility in terms of what we can do. But it's when it was just me, that was a challenge. But then when you have a team of 14 or 15, you've got a similar challenge. It's, you might be getting the workflow in, but then you might have the wrong work for the wrong, you might not have the right people available to do that work. So
Yes.
it's a different challenge now. But
Yes.
I, I,
Yes.
I think any business struggles with that. It's always
Yes.
going to be a problem.
Yes. It's the lead generation, as they say.
Yeah.
Um, and moving on to the industry, what's the biggest challenge you find as a business owner in your industry?
The waste sector, in lots of ways, is one of the unsafest industries in the country. So it's only
Exactly.
only agriculture kills more people in the sector. So the standard of training and support for staff within the sector is really, really poor.
Mm.
So if one of our products is doing training for waste customers, if they're not used to or not set up to do training, it's quite a hard market. You're pushing the ball uphill, as they say. So, as a sector, we've still got to grow up, we've still got to develop, and it sometimes feels a hard challenge to think, you really should be doing this, you really should be developing your staff, but
Okay, so it's educating your clients.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we generally try, we very much try and work with the right clients that actually want to go on that journey. There's other customers out there that will shy away from it, or will price accordingly because we know they're going to be quite challenging clients.
That's interesting. You said working with the right clients because I see so often companies that take the wrong client and it drains you out, it sucks in your resources, it slows you down. So it's important to have your client profile, identified and clear. Otherwise, you just take work from anybody. And
Yeah.
okay, so tell us a little bit more. So who is your ideal client?
Well, in real simple terms, I split the waste sector into three. So you've got local authorities who are very much the people that come and collect the bins at everybody's household. So they've got
Yes.
a collection and a waste facilities. You've then got what I would call the multinationals, your Biffas, your Veolias, and so on. And quite often they've got in-house specialists like us.
Yes.
But quite often they run into problems as well. They have people leave, they have issues. So that, you
And they
might
need to
not get,
outsource part of it.
yeah, you might not get consistent work from them, but you do get outsourced work. And in quite a lot of our clients, there's lots of SMEs out there. There's lots of, owner operators, maybe an owner with 10 trucks or 20 trucks. Quite often they're a good client for us because, we provide that, if you like, subcontract support to their business. And with the right relationship, we can really add value to their organization.
So it's companies with vehicles.
Well, it's either vehicles or recycling facilities.
Okay.
So you may have a company that's got a recycling facility where they'll accept certain waste types and process it. So, for example, we've got a company at the moment that takes all the household recycling from 10 different councils. They sort it into different products and then provide markets for it. So it's a real range of the waste sector is quite a diverse range of operators. You've got landfills, you've got incinerators, you've got anaerobic digestion plants, you've got composting plants, you've got recycling facilities. There's a whole
Which one
area.
is the one that takes the most waste?
Well, at the moment, in theory, we're meant to be recycling as much as possible. So in terms of real broad brush numbers, about 50% of the waste in the UK is recycled. So that'll go to either a recycling facility.
Is
And I
that
know that,
tracked? I mean, are those numbers accurate or is just
yeah, pretty much so. So every waste facility's got to measure the quantity they've
in
got. And
tons?
so the data's improved over the years. So the data is there. So you've got about 50% going to that. There's still a pretty chunky portion going to either landfill or to incineration, which is, generally we'll call that waste energy because they're effectively power stations. So you're burning the waste, you're generating electricity. The really good ones are also using the waste heat from the boilers.
Yes.
And there's ones looking at carbon capture where they're capturing the carbon and putting it into the ground to reduce their emissions. Uh, but the big issue in the waste sector is the poor segregation of waste.
Correct.
The public are pretty poor, and public and companies are pretty poor at segregating the waste properly.
I mean, I blame myself when I'm at an airport rushing and I'm eating my whatever I'm eating, and then I see three baskets there. I
Yeah,
mean,
and it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which one are you going
yeah,
to put in?
correct. So
Yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging, but I suppose if you want to look at who produced, we all blame ourselves for not recycling, but it's not ultimately it's not us that's producing the waste. It's the producers.
yes,
It's the sandwich makers. It's the drinks manufacturers.
yes,
They use that expression about bottled water. Bottled water is
yeah,
basically
but
selling plastic bottles.
also soft drinks that come on tiny containers.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable. I mean, I feel
yeah,
guilty just holding a plastic bottle for just, I don't know,
yeah,
100 ml or that
yeah,
you do, these energy drinks or whatever you call
yeah,
it.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. I
Yep.
was in the US 2 weeks ago, and there was a energy drink, soft drink, not very big, maybe 200 ml, but it was the plastic was so hard. It was such a well built.
Mm.
You wanted to keep, uh, thick plastic. And I says, my goodness, and there are tens of
Yeah.
thousands of bottles that are being just drunk and wasted away. I was
Well, you'll notice that there's been a huge amount of work done with, for example, the wine industry. So that you'll notice yourself sometimes you buy a bottle of wine and empty it, and then the bottle's really light, and then you'll have another one that's really, really heavy. So the wine industry's done a huge amount of work of what they call lightweighting bottles.
yes,
And what they've worked out is they've worked out the minimum wall thickness of a glass bottle that maintains the integrity of the wine, but then cuts down the amount of waste they produce.
yes,
So there's some countries still use the really heavy bottles, and that's producing like almost twice as much glass
yeah,
waste as the other one. So there's lots of work being done and stuff like that, but it's
yeah.
all sort of hidden in the background.
Yes. Well, Elon Musk is quite good at eliminating waste. When he builds rockets, does this need to be this thick? Can you go thinner? Do you need so many nails? Do you need? And he's challenging everything. And just it's a bit refreshing to see, that sometimes we don't think about processes, and we add so much fat on the thing and so much waste.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So what's the team? People running a business is also managing people. You've got a team of how many do you have?
15.
15. So how do you what is the attribute you look for, the quality you look for when you recruit people that makes a good fit with Albion?
Hmm. That's a challenging one. I'm maybe not the right person to ask here.
You've got somebody else doing the recruiting for you.
Well, yeah, maybe I've been recruiting the wrong people. No, I think as a business owner, probably the one thing I've struggled the most with is that people skills management. But is probably not it's probably not my key strength. And probably going back, I remember vividly 10, maybe more than that, 15 years ago, thinking I've just created a monster here. I've just created we had HR issues, we had people issues, and it was really challenging. And part of that was I had allowed things to sort of fester and not dealt with, and so on. And I went through that journey and learned that. Where we have done recently, we've done we've done for the last 3 years, Investors and People. And that we've actually found that really useful as a framework for just that staff engagement bit. And we just got accredited with gold there just a week or so ago. And it's now part, a lot of things we do is once we do things that they just become part of who we are.
Yes.
It's just part of the process. And
Yes.
that's a lot of the time, we do management systems, quality, environmental, health and safety for companies. And there's companies out there who'll sell a pre-pack list of here's your management system.
Mm.
It's never going to work unless it's embedded in the company. It's never going to work. And we're very much, it's not our system, it's your system. You need to own it. You need to take ownership of it and so on. So I think I do, certainly with the recruitment, I try and share that with others. I try and make sure others are fully involved in it now. And one of the things we do use quite a bit, because quite often we are employing technical people, is we will ask them to do a presentation, a pitch about what they can add to the company over,
Yes.
2 years, 3 years, 5 years,
Yes.
whatever it might be. And I find that quite a useful way of, one, getting them to think about whether we are the right fit for them, but also allowing us to see, the values they could maybe contribute to
Yes.
us.
Yes. Do you have values, a set of values by
Yes.
which you live and creates the culture of the business?
Yeah,
And
we've
becomes also
done.
your filter to recruit people, to make sure they are the right people.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on our values in terms of things like integrity, quality, looking after people, and so on. We've had a big, initially when people talked to me about values, I was a bit skeptical. I didn't think mean much, but we've had a real push to try and embed these values, and if we see behaviour that isn't aligned with these values, we're very much empowered everybody to go back and say, well, look, that doesn't reflect what we're about.
Yeah.
We shouldn't it be, let's not work with this client because their values don't align with us. Let's. I mean, we've done that. We had a client that was, fairly aggressive against female staff,
Yes.
and we just, and it was a fairly lucrative job, and we just said to them, look, we don't feel we can work with you, and
Yes.
we set apart the company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's challenging. I think the real challenge with value is fine to sit down in a room and create your values. It's how you actually live these values. That's the real challenge.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. When I work with clients and we talk about the values, I always say the values is who you are. They come from the core. It's not many people they choose aspirational values, or we
Yeah,
would like to be like this, or they look at other companies, but that's not who you are.
yeah,
So there is a lot to be said for that. It's like your management system. You say if it's not embedded,
yeah,
it's not gonna work. So if the values are not embedded, so they have to come from the inside, right?
yeah.
Inside out. Yes. Brilliant. So, books. What's is there a great book you've read that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, the most recent one strung a chord with me, and I feel a bit guilty for. No, I have actually. I was going to say I've not finished it yet, but I have now finished it. So just before Christmas, I know this quite well past Christmas actually, I got recommended a book called The Smarter Exit by a guy called Clive Spollander.
Uh-huh.
And it was recommended to me for various reasons, and it's very much about how you get your business exit ready. And it's not particular that I'm ready to exit. And the book is very much about that every business owner should be aiming to be exit ready. And the logic behind that is you never know what's going to happen. You never know if you're going to be ill or have some sort of problem. But it also means you actually set your business up properly, that the business can
Correct.
survive and look after itself without you.
Without
So
you.
so it's very much about working, on the business rather than in the
Yes.
business.
Yes.
And I probably read it at a particular time and it struck a bit of a chord, and that's what I need to move forward and start doing. And very much, I've probably not they've got various things in this book. I've probably not used a huge amount of it, but I've used I'm applying the principles, if you like, I've always got, and also interesting stuff about just, making sure that I think there's a real danger with business owners that 100% of your life becomes a business,
Yes.
and
Correct.
you need the other pillars of your life to help support. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And when the business it becomes less dependable on the owner, the value of the business
Exactly.
goes up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's brilliant. If you could spend a day in the life of, who would you go for, either living or from the past?
I would say a gentleman called Killian Journey, who is an elite mountain runner.
Okay,
So he's and I do a fair bit. So one of the things I managed to do in the last few years, I've managed to reduce my week to a 4-day week. So I tend to have a Friday off, and I tend to go round running in the hills of Scotland.
brilliant.
Uh, so
Barefooted?
not
Some
barefooted,
people
no,
do.
no, no, not barefooted. But I've got a local hill range here that called the Galloway Hills, which are particularly rugged, and
Brilliant.
they're not particularly high, but
Have you run up that hill behind you?
that is I have climbed that hill behind me. That's the Buccal at Glencoe.
Glencoe.
And there's a ridge on that called the Curved Ridge. So I am not particularly good with heights and
Mm.
exposure, and that's quite an exposed route. So I did manage to get up there with shaking hands and limbs. Whereas Killian Journey, who I've chosen, is quite happily will run along knife edge ridges and climb mountains without any ropes and all sorts of stuff, and
Wow.
has climbed Everest and is up
Really?
there as an elite athlete. But interestingly, one of the things he's done is obviously an athlete. He was most of his revenue came from sponsorship, from
Yes.
equipment.
Yes.
He actually parted company with all his equipment suppliers, and he set up his new brand of trainers called Normal. And the whole ethos of Normal is that you can actually the trainers last for as long as possible. So there's a whole sustainability aspect of it, and making
Yes.
sure you've got a
Brilliant.
trainer that lasts and can be used. So if you're most runners will have, I've got a house of, 10 or 15 pairs of shoes, which really I don't need 10 or 15 pairs of shoes if I had one pair that worked for me all the time. So
Yeah.
he's set up
Brilliant.
this business to, try and crack that being sustainable, but still
Yes.
able to make money from a product, which
Yes.
is quite a hard challenge. So
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
he's in the throes of that. So
I mean, I run a boys club, and you see kids changing trainers every 3 months.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you've got things like
and not cheap,
Adidas.
not cheap trainers.
Adidas came out with a shoe that you were meant to wear for one marathon. They were £200 a pop, and it was one
Yeah,
marathon. Think of the
yeah,
waste of
yeah,
resources
yeah,
there.
definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Alisa, just wrapping up, what piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh dear, stay doing the windsurfing and skiing job. No, I think in terms of I'm quite happy how things have worked out. I did land into, my intention was never to go into waste management. I ended up with my background is actually environmental health. That's what I was meant to go and work for a council. I
Yes,
am so glad that never happened, and I've
yes.
got I've got my former lecturer at the university to thank for that, because I went to him one day and said, "Look, I've got a job at this company called Shanks and McEwen, which is a waste management company, and I've got a job with the council. Shanks and McEwen one was paying 18.5 grand a year. Council one was paying 12.5 grand a year." And he said the Shanks and McEwen one, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And his answer was, "That Shanks and McEwen one will not come up again."
Brilliant.
And he was absolutely right.
Yeah,
Absolutely right.
yeah, fantastic.
So
Well, that's really, really good. What can I say? Well, Alisar, thank you very much for being on board with us today at Business Spotlights and sharing your experience in your journey. Thank you so much.
no bother. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.